Welcome to the 41st Annual NORML Conference. It's wonderful to see all of you. We all stand for freedom. And my friend Dominic Holden, who I met at my first Seattle Hemp Fest over 10 years ago, will be our opening speaker. Dominic last night earned the Hunter S. Thompson Award. He's an amazing individual, articulate without fear, does not take sides, but speaks his mind. And I can certainly appreciate that. And he is a columnist at the Seattle Stranger, former member, as Norm said, of the NORML board. And I would like to welcome Mr. Dominic Holden.
I never take sides. Ever. And I make a very, very large salary as a reporter at a weekly newspaper. If you ever want to bring home the dough, you know what to do. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Okay, then give me an N. N. That wasn't very good. Give me an N. N. Give me an O. O. Give me an R. R. Give me an M. M. Give me an L. L. What's that spell? What's that spell? What's that spell? That's fucking right, it does. I grew up in the Central District, on the edge of the Central District in Seattle. It's a mostly African-American neighborhood, and I lived right kind of on the edge. My block was about half black and half white, and down one side of the hill it was white kids, the other side of the hill it was black kids. And by the time I was a teenager, most of the African-American kids had been busted for pot. And the kids on the white side of the hill had taken acid and sold pot, and they didn't have a single damn problem with the police. And I went to a predominantly African-American Catholic school. There aren't many of those in Seattle, I'll tell you. And we were steeped in the civil rights movement. And I got into marijuana law reform because this is a civil rights issue. This is about fairness. This is about people not being discriminated against and being able to achieve their full potential without the government using marijuana as a tool to crack down on people it doesn't like, whether it's because cops are unfair, because we have institutional racism in this country. Marijuana is only incidental to that fight. When I was 24 years old, myself and a guy named Ben Livingston in Seattle, Washington, we wanted to run an initiative. And we talked to the ACLU, and it turned out to be an initiative that would make marijuana enforcement the lowest priority for police and prosecutors in Seattle, Washington. And we needed money. And the first person we went to was a man who's spoken at NORML conferences before, a local philanthropist named Bruce McKinney. We said, Bruce, can you please give us some money for our campaign? And he said, yes, I would love to give you some money for your campaign. I will give you $2,000 so you can conduct polling, so you can see that you will lose, so you will not run that campaign. Thank you, Bruce McKinney. We took that money and we did a poll, and we found that we had about 50% support and 17% undecided. And so, despite his advice, we decided to move forward, and we gathered our signatures, and we came to a NORML conference in San Francisco, and we asked other people for money, and we went to John Gilmore. I don't know if you guys know John Gilmore. He's been a philanthropist for this movement. And we said, John Gilmore, we have a good poll, and we're working on a campaign, and we would like you to please give us some money. And he said no. He said no. He says it's not going to work. It's going to be ineffective. You're probably not going to make the ballot. If you do, it's going to fail. No, 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 no. We made the ballot. Thank you very much, John Gilmore. And we were roaring into it. It was after Hemp Fest, and I was on the steering committee of Hemp Fest at the time, and it was 2003. We're about a month away from the vote, and I sit down with the Hemp Fest steering committee, and they say to me, that I-75, it's a bad idea. Not all of them, but most of them. They said, it's going to fail. They said, if it passes, it's not going to do anything. Also, your strategy sucks. You know, and we're the Seattle PI, which is a fairly progressive editorial board, they said, no, 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 it's a bad idea, you can't do it. And you know what? We did hear from the other side. We heard from the drug czar, And we heard from local law enforcement, the prosecutor's office, and the sheriff, and they were a voice. But the people who were loudest, the people who said that we shouldn't do it, the people who said your strategy is wrong, your law doesn't go far enough, those were people from our own side. These were other pot activists and other progressives. Have you guys ever heard of a concern troll? A concern troll is someone on the internet who pretends like they share all your values and your goals, but maybe your strategy's a little off. So we were hounded by concern trolls, but we pushed forward with I-75 anyway because we thought it was winnable. And the problem with marijuana law reform, in my opinion, the #1 hurdle we have is convincing people that we can fucking win. How many of you, and we can win, but how many of you have gathered petition signatures where people haven't signed it yet and they tell you, I've already signed it? That ever happened to you guys? Has any one of you ever sat down with someone who totally supports legalizing marijuana and they said, I'm totally with you, but I don't think it's going to happen? Yeah? We're faced by losses all the time. Some of it's fatigue, sometimes it's because every time there's a medical marijuana raid, people think that medical marijuana laws have been nullified across the country. So we are plagued by these losses. And what we need are more wins to instill this confidence in our own allies. And so I-75, it fucking won. It won by 57 to 43%, it fucking won. And what did it do well? Prioritized marijuana enforcement. We didn't make it up. Dale Geringer did it in Mendocino County. I don't know where Dale is. There's Dale. Holler for Dale Geringer. Oakland has done it. Lots of cities have done it. And what that does is it does not just put a gesture law on the book, something that's essentially a resolution, and it doesn't just encourage those enforcement officials who can use their discretion to stop marijuana prosecutions. It changes the identity of a region when you are winning. Thanks to things like I-75 and thanks to HempFest, when you read articles about Seattle, they say marijuana, Seattle is a very marijuana-friendly city. We actually wrote that at the bottom of our press releases for a long time. See, if we say it long enough, it becomes true. And it is true. People think of Seattle as a place that supports marijuana legalization the same way that people who live in San Francisco think that they live in a gay-friendly city, and they're not, sure as hell not going to discriminate against gay people, and people in Seattle are going to shut their damn traps if they think that pot smokers should go to jail. Now, every single elected official in Seattle is on the record supporting legalization. Our sheriff is on the record supporting legalization. Every single member of Seattle's legislative delegation supports legalization. So one little win a ways back has changed the culture, and it set us up for another win. And I'm here, I basically wasn't told what I'm going to talk about, so I'm going to talk about winning. And I'm going to, so what I want to talk about is our short-term goals and our long-term goals and how they involve winning all the way along the road. We need to take our victories when we can get them. So I'm going to talk about three things. The first one is what we can learn from experiences in Washington, in California, and from the Civil Rights Movement. The second thing I'm going to talk about is what is happening right now in Washington State. And the third thing I'm going to talk about is what makes the difference between something that can win from something that cannot win. So we have a lot of experience with small victories leading to larger victories. And I'm going to talk very quickly about California. In California, in 1991, voters passed Proposition P. It was basically a resolution that said, we support the medical use of cannabis. And it passed by 80%. It was incredible. Was that the final word on medical marijuana in San Francisco or California in the United States? No. Absolutely it was not. The Board of Supervisors of San Francisco came in the following year and made marijuana for medical purposes the lowest priority. In 3 years after that, in 1995, California voters passed Proposition 215 that legalized medical marijuana, one of the best medical marijuana laws in the entire country. And that was built on the previous victories. In 2010, the legislature in California approved a bill that decriminalized the possession. It had been a misdemeanor in California, and then they decriminalized it to an infraction punishable by a $100 fine that would not show up on your criminal record. All of these are victories that have built on the ones beforehand. And all of them, there are people along the way who have said it's not enough, we need to do more. And they're right. It's not enough, we do need to do more, but they're not the final word. And do any of you live in states that still have state-run liquor stores? How fucking backward is that shit, right? Alcohol laws are fluid. Marijuana laws are fluid. Of those people who raised your hand just then, raise your hand if you believe that what you have now is worse than prohibition. If you'd like to go back to prohibition instead of this idiotic fucking state-run stores. Not a goddamn hand, right? You gotta build on your victories. I want to look at gay rights in Washington State. In 2006, our legislature passed an anti-discrimination bill against gays and lesbians. And people said, that's not enough, we want gay marriage. And the legislature said, yeah, we hear you, we don't think that gay marriage can pass. And they came back the next year, in 2007, and they had a sip of water. You have to do it once a year. They came back in 2007 and they passed a domestic partnership bill that conferred these romantic rights of marriage, like making funeral arrangements and hospital visitation, to same-sex couples. And then they came back in 2008 and they extended more rights to gay couples. They came back in 2009 and they extended all of the state-granted rights of marriage to same-sex couples that are afforded to opposite-sex couples. But throughout it, people were screaming bloody murder. They were marching and they were saying, marriage equality now, and we need to do more. And there's a columnist named Ken Schramm who works for Como in Seattle, and he wrote a nasty column chiding State Senator Ed Murray, saying, why haven't you introduced a marriage bill? And he actually had introduced a marriage bill, but it couldn't get any traction because it wasn't its time yet. And now, finally, in 2012, the Washington State Legislature passed marriage equality so that all gay couples in Washington State get the equal rights that they finally deserve. And the right wing, yeah, but hold your goddamn applause, because the right wing fucking bigots have put it on the ballot. They've done exactly what people thought they would do. They put it on the ballot, they're challenging it, and now, in 2012, we're at a place that we couldn't have been a few years before we had these discussions about domestic partnerships. We have the polling that says that we are likely to be one of the first states in the country, along with Maryland and Maine, this November, to be states in which the general public legalizes same-sex marriage for the very first time. Because 2012 is the year we can do it, but 2006 was not the year we could do it. And each of the victories in between built on where we are now. Consider the Civil Rights Movement. The Emancipation Proclamation was not the final word. And Brown versus Board of Education in 1954 was not the final piece of legislation for civil rights. And even the Civil Rights Act, 10 years later in 1964, was not the final word on civil rights. For all of these cases, medical marijuana patients in California are still going to be harassed. Gay couples are still going to be discriminated against even after same-sex marriage is legalized. And African Americans and non-white people are going to be discriminated against because of the color of their skin. But is there anyone here in this room who would say that the steps that we've taken so far on those fronts should not have been done? No, they're all important. They're all part of where we're going. And I want to talk now about what's happening in Washington State. In Washington State, there's an initiative on the ballot next month that would legalize marijuana possession of up to an ounce for adults 21 and over. It would allow them to possess up to 16 ounces of cannabis-infused food product and 72 ounces, like a six-pack of marijuana-infused in some sort of liquid form, which is a shocking amount of hash oil. I just want to go ahead and it's like a six-pack of hash oil. It's just like alcohol. The polling looks good. The polling looks really good. Survey USA found it up with 57% support, and with a 23-point lead. Other polls show it around 50%, but still with a strong lead over opposition. The backers include sponsor Rick Steves, who's right over there. Rick Steves, raise your hand. Also former U.S. Attorney John McKay. Also Kim Thorburn, formerly of the Spokane's Health Department in rural conservative eastern Washington. They are the sponsors. And this initiative just got another $1 million for a fall ad buy, and they're expecting as much as another $2 million to move their target demographic. I-502 is moving in the right direction. Who is opposing Initiative 502? Pat Slack, a law enforcement officer from Snohomish County, is among them. But they're pretty quiet and half-hearted. The people who have filed the No on I-502 pack, they're pot activists. It's Steve Sarich, who runs a dispensary group called Canacare, Gil Mobley, a cannabis doctor who writes authorizations in Washington, and a whole passel of pot activists along with them, including some who've run initiatives before. At the medical marijuana march that we had in May, they brought their signs, they brought their banners, they brought their t-shirts. They turned it into a "Don't Legalize Marijuana" march. It was the weirdest fucking thing I've ever seen as a pot activist, and I've been doing this since 1994. They have a couple leading complaints. The first one is they don't like a provision in I-502 that says that if you have 5 nanograms of active THC in your blood for every 5 nanograms of active THC for every milliliter of whole blood, then you are automatically guilty of DUI. It's a per se standard like we use for alcohol. I'm not a huge fan of per se standards, I've got to admit. I think that you should have to prove impairment. But this is the standard we have in Washington, it's the standard we have in a lot of different places. And what the opponents have been saying is that someone who has used marijuana, a regular marijuana user, a medical marijuana user, will test positive for exceeding that level a day later, 2 days later, a week later. Well, guess what? They don't have a single fucking scientific study to back them up. In fact, the science proves them wrong. What science shows is that the vast majority of marijuana users drop below that 5 nanogram level within a few hours, and none within 12 to 24 hours, and certainly not a day later, or 2 days later, or a week later. Their argument is fundamentally flawed because it's a lie. That is what our medical marijuana industry in Washington State has been pushing as its primary argument. They are also concerned about a federal challenge. They say that if we pass I-502, well then the federal government is going to challenge us on legalizing pot. Newsflash, that's the damn point. I had a Facebook comment 2 days ago. A person said, well, we don't want to pass I-502. What we need to do is we need to wait for Congress or the UN to legalize marijuana. You can go ahead and raise your hand if you think that the Congress or the UN is going to legalize marijuana without the states pushing them to do it. No? I'd hope for more optimism, frankly. People also complain that you're not going to be able to grow marijuana at home. The truth is, you look at polling, and it shows that people are very concerned about allowing home cultivation. I think people should be able to grow a few plants at home. But we've seen a lot of people robbed for their medical marijuana grows. People don't want it near a school zone. It's an Achilles heel. So they've written the law this way so that they can pass it. And then a lot of pot activists say, but marijuana is going to be taxed. Shut up, teenagers. Yeah, marijuana is going to be taxed. Like, what crazy planet do you live in that you think we're going to legalize a gigantic agricultural commodity and we're not going to fucking tax it? You greedy bastards. I went to HempFest. I went to HempFest in August, and HempFest is the largest marijuana legalization rally in the entire world, and I'm so goddamn proud that it's in Seattle, Washington. And it did the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my entire life this year. It was the largest anti-marijuana legalization rally I've ever been to in my life, because it was overrun by medical marijuana dispensaries and medical marijuana industry opposing Initiative 502, sometimes violating election law by not identifying who was paying for stuff. Handouts, banners, signs, t-shirts, people wearing those crazy things over there, like signs that you walk around saying, "No on 502." That's what they were doing. They were up and down, thick, a mile on the downtown waterfront. And they were telling patients, they were telling medical marijuana patients that if I-502 passes, you're not going to be allowed to grow at home. I-502 doesn't touch the medical marijuana law in Washington. But they lie to them to scare the shit out of people, and I don't think that that's particularly fair. They also say that people who smoke pot are going to be pulled over, tested roadside, a week after they've smoked pot, and they're going to be sent to jail. Well, it's bullshit. It's just bullshit. You can't test someone's blood by the side of the road. You still need probable cause, and you're not going to be detecting it in someone's blood, the science shows, a day or 2 or 3 days later. That's just not what there is. But they were harassing the I-502 volunteers, and the HempFest volunteers were part of the problem. But if you look at the people all together who are opposing legalization in Washington right now, and I hate to say it, and they'll say that I'm just an ad hominem attack machine, and they'll say I take sides, which I do. The people opposing I-502 are the ones who are making hand over goddamn fist under prohibition. Those are the people most loudly opposing 502, and I gotta point out that Pat Slack, the law enforcement officer from Snohomish County, he's also making a salary based on prohibition. And frankly, I don't give a rat's ass what they think about legalization if they're the ones profiting from it right now. And some of the people who are also opposing it, I'm not gonna name any names again. He's hiding, he ran. He ran. Jeffrey Steinborn is not in the room, has worked on another initiative, Sensible Washington. They're a group that ran initiatives in Washington State for a few years, and none of them got enough signatures. They're the people who are saying that we should not pass I-502. And this raises a question then. What is winnable? What is a winnable initiative and what is not a winnable initiative? Why would we be enthusiastic about I-502 but not enthusiastic about the initiatives that Sensible Washington ran? And so I wanted to break that down. And for people who are used to this, this isn't rocket science, it's not new, but I do have to point it out because it seems like a lot of people forget it. And I have to sort of back up a little bit and say, you know, this is about winning campaigns. There is something worse than losing a campaign. And that's not even making it to the finish line. With Sensible Washington, they ran their signatures, they sent out their volunteers to petition, they said that this was all within reach, and their volunteers worked so hard to gather those signatures for no money, year after year, and it didn't even get to the ballot. So that when those people say, I've already signed that, I don't want to volunteer, I don't think we're ever going to make it, it's because there are campaigns that don't have the resources and the foresight to make sure that they are in fact winnable. Because you can run something that is potentially winnable and lose, and you can win by losing. By having the discussion in public, we get our issue out there. So you run something viable, it doesn't make it, that's okay, it's not the end of the world. But where we don't win is by running something that is poorly thought out, that polling shows is never going to succeed, that doesn't have credible backers involved, that basically looks half-baked, like we're baked, like we're stoned and we haven't thought it through. So here's what you need if you want to run a winning campaign. You need money. You need a bunch of fucking money. If you can't get a bunch of fucking money, don't run a fucking initiative. It's that simple. You need credible spokespeople. You need people like Rick Skeets. You need people like John McKay. And if you, the organizers, and sort of who are the kernel of the campaign, aren't those people, that's okay, but you need to be able to bring them in. You need to also bring in campaign professionals who know how to run campaigns. And you've got to have polling that's on your side. And part of getting polling that's on your side, and this is critical, it's compromise. You're not always going to get what you want. You're not going to be able to run the initiative of your dreams. We're not going to run the initiative that completely legalizes pot and makes every single person happy. You want a bill that can win. In 2012, yes. Bills that can win. In 2012, a bill that can win is Initiative 502. It's not some no-tax, grow-at-home, crazy, regulation-free campaign like has been run in Washington State before. It is 502. In 2003, it was deprioritization. In 98, in Washington, it was our medical marijuana law. And in 1995, in California, it was the medical marijuana law. And just as the Civil Rights Act couldn't have passed 50 years before it did, all of our marijuana laws are going to pass when it is their time and we have the resources to pass them. And here's what you don't need. What you don't need is every damn pot activist where you live to sign off on your initiative and give it their blessing. Because they're going to come. They're going to come and say, well, you didn't talk to us enough first. No, because your ideas were stupid, I'm sorry. Or we listened to you, but we didn't take your advice because we needed money and we needed polling and we needed something that could win. And I'm sorry if that hurts anyone's feelings, but sometimes winning hurts feelings. And they're going to say, but what if you have a federal... Actually, I want to stop really quickly. There's a campaign out there, Solano Beach. They're talking about legalizing dispensaries. That is a small, manageable campaign that looks like it can win. That is smart. You don't have to run the biggest initiative. It can be a resolution supporting medical marijuana. It can be allowing dispensaries. It can be making pot the lowest enforcement priority. It can be legalizing marijuana outright. But you got to do what can win. And what they're doing is very smart and it looks very affordable, and I applaud them. People will come, though, for these bigger initiatives, and they'll say, well, what about a federal challenge? I just want to point something out, that we're watching a federal challenge right now over gay marriage. We've watched the Proposition 8 fight right now. And what has happened since that began? Polling shows most Americans support marriage equality now. Imagine that. The president says that he supports marriage equality now. The DNC last month, everyone was coming out for marriage equality. Marriage equality is the status quo, not in spite of, but because of a federal challenge. We want to challenge the federal government as well, make marijuana a national dialogue, and make legalization the status quo. And we can do that if we keep winning. Thank you very much.